Hello there and welcome again to Numerology Techniques. This is the second video in our series of using Numerology version 2.3 with the Novation Launchpad. In this video we're going to discuss how to control the polynote, the drum sequencer, and the chord sequencer from the Launchpad. Once again we're going to start with the rack navigation page, and we have an overview of our modules. The red one is the mononote from our last video. Next we have the drum sequencer, which shows up in yellow, so we can tap this button to jump over to edit mode for that. And we don't see anything at first because we don't have any steps programmed. And I've already got a drum kit running with the water kit sounds from the Numerology 2 download. So I'm going to go ahead and start the transport. And the way this works is, if you can tell by the lights, is there are 4 parts. Each part is 16 steps on 2 different rows. So the first part is on the first 2 rows. Second part is on the next 2 rows. And then we have 2 more parts down here. And then if we want to get to the 4 other parts in the drum sequencer, we can hit the range button down. And then we've got more parts here, and just program a little graphical pattern. Okay, if we want to delete drum hits, all we do is push the buttons again. So it's pretty fast to clear out a pattern in a controlled fashion. If we go back to our first 4 parts, of course, like the mononote, the drum sequencer has access to several other parameter pages, such as start, end, and skip, sequence control, gate, and so forth. So once you learn all these for the mononote, they work pretty much the same for the drum sequencer. Next up, we'll go back to rack navigation, and we're going to look at the polynote sequencer. This sequencer is mapped out just like the mononote sequencer. We have our octave controls along the top, and then scale controls along the middle. Of course, the difference is that we can program polyphonic patterns. I have a synthesizer set up so we can listen to this. Set it to an 8-step pattern. Set it to alternating second mode. And see, it's just like using the mononote. Next on our tour, go back to the rack navigation page. We have the chord sequencer, which is the last in our series of 4 sequencers. So we tap that button to get to the chord sequencer. The primary edit page for the chord sequencer is easily the most complicated of all the edit pages of all the note sequencers. And this is because there are so many parameters that can affect a chord. Access to these parameters is through the top row of buttons on the grid. First, we have a green button to set the primary interval of the chord. Next, we have 2 buttons to select the chord type, in case there's more than 7 chord types. Next, for the red button, we have the chord family. And then we have inversion, spacing, and octave. Probably the easiest way to learn these is to print out the cheat sheet for the numerology mapping for the Launchpad and keep that handy. But even if you just start with a degree page, you can set up some interesting chord progressions. We're going to start with a very simple one. We're going to go 1, 4, 5, let that go back to 1. So let's listen to that. Okay, so we can go from there, and we can just start changing things around, seeing how that sounds. We can go over to the chord family page, and I want to change all of these to 7th chords, which is the 4th row up on the grid. And we're going to go back to chord type, and I'm just going to pick some chord types at random, just so you can get a feel for how this sounds. And of course, if you want, you can go over and change the inversion and the spacing and the octave. And then everything else about the chord sequencer is just like the other sequencers. So you can change the length of the sequence with the start and end step. You can go into sequence controls, gate length, velocity, and so on. Again, the primary edit page is a little more complicated than the other sequencers, but it's not too bad, and you can learn it a little bit at a time as you need to. So that concludes the second part in this video series on using Numerology 2.3 with the Novation Launchpad. Be sure to check out the next video where we talk about controlling presets and the mixer.